So a little while ago, I made a video asking Hoka to please release a real super shoe that is on par with the competition, and it seems like they listened because now we have the Rocket X2, and it is unlike any of their previous carbon-plated shoes before. I've done a few runs in it. I'm ready to give you my first impressions. Just a quick disclaimer though, that I am a Running Warehouse ambassador and they did send these shoes to me, but all my thoughts and opinions are my own. With that out of the way, let's get into the specs. The stack height is 37mm in the heel and 31 in the forefoot with a 6mm heel to toe drop. The weight comes in at 7 ounces and the price point is $250. I put this in the carbon plated racer category. Let's go ahead and dive into what's new in the shoe overview. Starting with the upper, it uses synthetic mesh to provide a minimal yet secure lockdown and has very little padding or structure. The midsole is the first from Hoka to use PEBA foam. It uses a softer top layer and a firmer bottom layer with a forked carbon fiber plate sandwiched in between. The outsole keeps coverage to a minimum to save weight, but has coverage in the forefoot and heel and uses their Durabration compound. Now, talking about the fit, I got my typical men's size 12 in the shoe, and I thought that the length and width and everything fit good, but I will say it's a bit more on the kind of shorter side of things. I don't know, it's maybe kind of more of a traditional racing flat fit, I would say. When I was doing longer runs, I never got any rubbing or anything, but just it's not as roomy as like your normal training shoe. But overall, I had a good lockdown and thought it fit well. Now let's get into the ride and my first impressions. So Hoka is no stranger to carbon fiber plates and thick midsoles, but this is their first with that PEBA foam, and with their signature rocker, the PEBA foam and the plate, the shoe really comes alive. So this PEBA foam makes the ride really smooth and really soft, but I wouldn't say it's super soft like fuel cell. That could be a little bit too squishy. This still has a nice responsiveness to it that, paired with the carbon fiber plate, gives you a nice pop off the toe, especially when you're picking up the pace. I did find that this kind of wider platform, especially in the midfoot, did really help the shoe feel more stable than some of the competition as well. I like that they tweaked the plate in here as well. Now it's kind of scoops down. Before it was just flat on the bottom, and so I think this helps give it that little extra pop off the toe as well. But overall, I think they did a really good job with the midsole here. So I used this shoe on a few different runs. I did a long progression run, some hill repeats and fartlek, and I will say that when I was picking up this pace, the shoe kind of firmed up and felt really nice. When I was going fast, felt more snappy, but in between reps, when I was kind of doing a recovery jog, I was laying a little further back and it felt nice and soft and protective. Talking about the upper real quick, it actually reminds me a lot of the Vaporweave material found on the Vaporfly Next Percent. I didn't really have any complaints with it except for the material they decided to use inside the heel counter here. It's kind of this suede material, and whenever I was putting on my shoes or taking them off, it kind of got stuck to my socks. So that's just a little tiny complaint from me there. But overall, I think Hoka does really have a solid race day option here. Alright, I'm going to do a few quick comparisons. The first shoe I'm going to compare it to is the first Rocket X. So these two shoes are very different. This one has a much lower stack height, and like I said, it has just a flat carbon plate along the bottom. It's not scooped. The upper is more structured, and the midsole is just compression molded EVA. So I like this as kind of like an up-tempo trainer shoe, but it wasn't super fast feeling on speedy days. Now the Rocket X2 has that thicker midsole, uses that PEBA foam, that curved carbon plate, and a more minimal upper. I think that it is a much faster feeling shoe and definitely built for race day. So if you just kind of want like an up-tempo trainer, the first one is still good for that. But for race day, I'm definitely grabbing the Rocket X2. Next up is the Adios Pro 2 from Adidas. So I think that these two shoes actually have a lot in common. Found that their upper materials were kind of similar as well. The very light kind of, like I mentioned, Vaporweave, plasticky, nylon type material. But I also found that their midsoles were pretty similar. think that the Lightstrike Pro is maybe a tad firmer, but overall I thought they had a very similar feel in the terms of bounce and responsiveness. I will say that the Rocket X2 did feel more stable though, compared to kind of some of the weird geometry here, and that real carbon plate in here compared to the carbon rods in the Adios Pro 2 did make it feel a little snappier in my opinion. Next up we have the Vaporfly Next% 3 from Nike. So they both have very minimal uppers. I didn't have the best time with the upper on the Vaporfly Next% 2, so I kind of like the upper a little bit better on the Rocket X2. As for the midsoles, they're both top tier PEBA based foams. I found that the Zoom X in the Vaporfly Next% 3 was a little bit firmer and felt maybe a little more responsive when I was doing faster paces. For marathon races, I think they'd both be good, but I kind of like a little bit softer in the Rocket X2. Plus, I like how it's more stable in the midfoot compared to the Next% 3. Either way, I think they're both good options, just kind of depends what you prefer. And finally, a lot of people have asked how it compares to the Carbon X3, and I don't think they're really even in the same ballpark. The Carbon X3 uses a very firm EVA foam. It has that flat carbon plate. The upper was ill-fitting for me. And while the Rocket X3 is a fast shoe, I just don't think it compares to the PEBA foam found in the Rocket X2. And this is going to be hands down a much better shoe in my opinion for race day. So overall, I think that Hoka made a huge leap here by introducing PEBA into its first shoe and tweaking that carbon fiber plate. And while I don't think it's a huge leap compared to the competition, I think is kind of just on par with competition now. I wouldn't say there's anything really groundbreaking or innovative here, but I think that was much needed. And it might actually be in probably the top 3 choices for me for a marathon racer right now. So while it's nothing crazy, mind-blowing new that we've never seen before, it is still a solid shoe. So I will have to put more miles on the shoe before I give you my final verdict in the full review. But let's just say that, again, I'm very happy to see Hoka starting to use PEBA foam and excited to see their other shoes that will be using PEBA foam, maybe even this year. Thanks for watching. Subscribe so you don't miss any of my new videos, and as always, keep on running.